Tanya Talega, who is an Anishinaabe journal and speaker. Tanya is the acclaimed author of Seven Fallen Feathers and All Our Relations, which are national bestsellers. So if you have any questions, send it to Kelsey and we will save them for the end. Everybody, let's welcome Tanya onto the platform.
Miigwech, Jocelyn, Buju, Anin, Tanya Talaga, Nigis Nakas, Kamusko, Pumijit Pinishish, Nigis Nakas. Hello, I'm so very glad to be here today. I'm coming to you from Fogo Island, a summer hunting ground for the Beothuk people. And before I begin, I just want to give thanks to Virginia for that most beautiful prayer and for being here today. I want to give thanks to the elders that are here today, to the Anishinaabe Nation for inviting me to be here, and also to Jocelyn, our youth. It's so wonderful to see you here, engaged, listening, and taking our stories forward. So, you heard that I'm an author and I'm a journalist. I'm a storyteller. I've written a couple of books, Seven Fallen Feathers, and All Our Relations. And I now write a column for the Globe and Mail newspaper. And while I live in the city of Takaranto, is where I was born and raised, it's important you know a little bit about me, about where I'm from, and who my people are. My father was Polish, but my mom is from the traditional territory of Fort William First Nation on the shores of Lake Superior. You know, Elder Sam Machipininskami always tells me that you must introduce yourself. You must tell everyone where you're from so they know who is speaking, so our ancestors know who's speaking. And so, keeping with that, I want you to know that my mother Sheila, she was raised by residential school survivors, by her grandparents, Liz Gauthier and Alphonse Piskey. She was raised in Wraith and in Graham, Ontario, near our family's now lost trapline. Where my mother is from is where the waters on Turtle Island split. They either run north to James and Hudson Bay, or they run south to the urban cities. I've always felt that where my mother is from is a particularly special place. It's a place of ceremony. It's a place you can just feel when you're there. You feel the waters, Nibi, making a choice. You feel the trees. You feel everything around you. It's the place where I feel the most at home. My mother's three brothers were taken in the 60s scoop. Two have come back. One did not. He passed before he could. My sister Donna was adopted out at age 1 by a non-Indigenous family, and she was raised in Manitoba. I did not meet her until I was in my 20s. I actually didn't know I had a sister until I was in my 20s. And sadly, I lost my sister about 7 years ago when she passed. My family's experience forms all of my writing, forms my speaking, everything really that I do. So this is where I always begin. I am on a constant journey of learning. And I was thinking today, what do I say? How do I talk and bring messages of love? You know, this is something that we need to hear right now, I think. I think we need to lean on our teachings because there's so much going on around us. So much. You know, between COVID-19, trucker convoy, what's happening in Ukraine, and a story we have always known the discovery, and the recovery of thousands of our children who did not come home from residential school. Keeping all of that in mind, all of these things that are swirling around us, I thought that I would spend my time with you today by telling you a story. Telling you a story about the importance of our seven grandfather teachings, Anishinaabe teachings. As you know, we are guided by these seven teachings, seven truths. And these teachings are handed down to us from our ancestors, told to us by our elders. And you know, while there are hundreds and hundreds of different First Nations from coast to coast to coast, many of us share a version of the seven grandfather teachings. And as you know, each of the teachings are represented by its own animal. I'm going to talk about the teachings a little bit now. I'm going to go over them with you just to remind you. Those teachings are respect, humility, love, honesty, bravery, wisdom, and truth. As you know, truth is represented by the turtle. The turtle was here during the creation of the earth. The turtle carries the teachings of life on its back. Humility is represented by the wolf. The wolf lives for his or her pack. And the ultimate shame is not to be part of the pack, but to be an outcast. Respect to me is represented by the buffalo. The buffalo gives every part of his being to sustain the human way of living. The buffalo respects the balance and the needs of others. And the eagle represents love, because the eagle has the strength to carry all of the teachings on his or her back. Honesty is represented by the raven or the sabe. They both understand who they are and how to walk in their life, be comfortable in their own skin. Bravery is the bear, Magua. The bear has the courage and strength to face her fears no matter what. The bear faces all challenges while protecting her young and her family. To face life with courage is to be brave. The beaver represents wisdom, because the beaver uses its own natural gifts to alter the environment for families' and communities' survivals. You know, without these teachings, I would be lost, rudderless, uncertain of who I am, where I belong, and what my purpose in life is. You know, and I talk about these teachings because I think that these teachings can help us figure out how to live in a good way, how we can live on this continent, on Turtle Island, together. Do you know, sometimes I think that it doesn't matter if you're Anishinaabe or not, these teachings can help us all move forward together in a good way for a good life. So I want you to reflect on these teachings today. I want you to think about them and to think about what those words really mean. I want you to think about how we could use each of these words, each of these teachings every single day. Every single day. When we wake up, we go downstairs, we see our kids. You know, I think of the teaching of love when I see my teenagers and they have yet to, put the dishes away, or if they've left a mess and they've left it for me to clean up first thing in the morning. And I think to myself sometimes, you know what? Love. Go give them a hug. Tell them that you love them and that they belong. And you are so, so grateful to see them, to have them with you. You know, I think it's important that we also think of these 7 teachings when we look at what's happened around us, and when we look at the colonial history of this country, and how for years governments, Canada, Ontario, municipal governments, have ignored many of the Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action. As you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission went around the country and reported in 2015, they reported 94 calls to action after speaking with over 6,000 survivors and witnesses to the schools. As you know, there were over 139 residential schools that were part of the TRC, but we know that number is actually far greater. There were day schools, there were private schools. So many of our kids went to the schools. And I think that when we look at the calls to action, so many are important. But to me, the most important calls are the calls concerning education, are some of the most important calls. It's important that we teach our way of life, our knowledge, to students and to children, so they grow up loving who they are, so they grow up loving themselves and feeling like they belong. And we also need other kids, students, teachers, and parents to understand who we are. What makes us Anishinaabe? You know, for years, the government of Ontario tried to ignore TRC's call to action number 62, which calls for making teachings about the treaties in the schools and the contributions of our people today mandatory in all schools. I was talking about those 94 calls to action. I believe that those 94 calls are a roadmap, a gift, if you will, from former Commissioner Chair Murray Sinclair, Chief Warren Littlechild, and journalist Marie Wilson. Those calls were a gift to the people of Canada on how this nation could heal its wounds after its genocidal history, how we could walk forward together. As we all know, our shared history was not an elective. It was not a choice. We did not ask for all of our relations, for over 150,000 children to be taken from their families, their language, from everything they know, their way of life, in order to be placed in these government-funded, church-run schools aimed at beating the Indian out of the child. We did not ask for our brothers and our sisters, our aunties or our uncles, to be scooped up by child welfare authorities and adopted out to white families. We did not ask to be living in molding housing in communities without basic medical care, without high schools for our children, without clean running water that goes from the tap into your glass so you can shower, so you can wash your vegetables, your clothes. We did not ask to be both shut out of the justice system and conversely locked behind bars at a far greater rate than anyone else. We did not ask for this treatment in our own land. All of these things happened as a result of Canada's long-standing colonial history and laws created to tame, diminish, and control the Indigenous population, to move First Nations, Métis, Inuit out of the way so others could come here, settle, and reap the rewards of this country we now call Canada. There is a lot of bleakness here, a lot of truth that needs to be found and told and aired out. So much before we can even begin to discuss reconciliation. So today, I thought that it was important to concentrate on the teaching of love. And so I can't think of a better person to help me illustrate this teaching other than through the story of how I came to meet and to know Elder Sam Machne Penenscum. I'm going to talk to you today not about romantic love, but about a love that comes from a love of community, a love of caring for one another, a love for people. So I often visit Sam when I'm in Thunder Bay. I'm sure many of you know him, and you probably know that his hangout, his office, is at the local Tim Hortons, just off D Street. His daily vice is a triple sugar, triple cream, extra large coffee. And truth be told, he has about 3 of them a day. And when you first meet Sam, it feels like you've always known him. He's got an ease about him, a warm, deep voice, and a very subtle, wicked sense of humor. He's got a long gray goatee, and he's got a quiet smile. It's almost feline-like. Sam is always at Timmy's. It's where you will find him every single morning, dispensing advice. He's even got his own booth to the right of the door as soon as you walk in. Everyone knows him here. And they also know if you are down on your luck, in need of some food or a gentle ear, Sam is there for you. But like many of our people, Sam has had a lot of loss in his life. Loss because of racism, because of colonization, because of the schools. And his road to love and to peace, it's not always been an easy one. In fact, I know he works on it every single day. I speak to Sam nearly every day on Facebook Messenger. He's helping me in many ways. Every day he sends me a new word in Anishinaabe. I'm trying to learn language that was not passed down to me, and I hope to do that one day. I know that Sam's motivation every day comes from his own source of love for his family, love for his people, and in trying to make sense of the Anishinaabeg's place in this world. That's not an easy task. When I ask Sam, why is it important that we live our life listening to these 7 teachings? This is what he tells me. He said, well, we need to have some guidance, something to follow. You know, it's just like getting anything in life, anything new in life. You need to get directions on how to use it properly. And when we were given this life, we were given instructions on how we should live our life, how we need to remember our roles and our responsibilities, not just to each other, but to nature, to earth, to air, the sky, water, and to the Creator as well. If you know Sam, you know that he is a survivor of 3 residential schools. You know that many of us are touched by the schools. We've had parents, grandparents, siblings, great-grandparents who went to the schools, generations taken from their parents and their homes and their communities and sent to these places from the mid-1800s to 1996. We know that the goal was assimilation, to turn us all into, quote unquote, good Canadian citizens, good British subjects. And we know the truth of what happened in these schools. We know the abuse, physical, sexual, emotional. We know of the neglect, the blind neglect. Our children, they were hungry. Our children were separated from everything that they knew. Many of our children attended the schools and they never came home. We have always known this too. In our families, there are always stories of those who were lost. The TRC said About 4,000 children died at the schools, but we know that that is a conservative estimate, and the actual count is more like 6,000 to 20,000 children. Each number is a child, a person, an opportunity lost. We know that these so-called schools cause damage for generations. Sam went to his first school when he was 12. Sam's first school was St. Anne's on the shore of the James Bay coast. You know, it was a notorious, notorious place. Above many things that happened there, one of the most heinous was a homemade electric chair used frequently to discipline the students. Sam also went to McIntosh Indian Residential School in Vermilion Bay, northwestern Ontario. And when that school burnt down in 1965, he was sent to Cecilia Jeffrey near Kenora, Ontario, even farther from his home in Martin Falls First Nation. Some of Sam's large extended family was at Cecilia Jeffrey, including his cousin Cheney Wenjack. And we all know Cheney's story of how in October 1966, he was one of 9 students that ran away on a Sunday. He ran away and he tried to walk home. He knew in his 12-year-old mind that he came in by rail, and so he should walk by rail. But sadly, Agokie Post Martin Falls First Nation was more than 800 kilometers away. We know that he never made it. He died of exposure, walking along the railway tracks, alone. Sam's cousin has become a symbol of the Indian residential school experience for a lot of people in Canada, a lot of non-Indigenous people in Canada. And that was because a singer, the late Gord Downie, devoted the last years of his life to tell the story, to tell the truth of Cheney. You know, Sam says he survived the schools due to his teachings and how he was grounded in them, and how when he first went to the schools, he felt grounded in who he was. He said to me, "I grew up in the bush. I never came out of the bush until I was 12 to attend school. And while living there, I lived with my parents and my extended family." He said, "I learned to learn everything that I needed to know to live on the land, to learn about the land, his language, all of the good things." He said I had a good support system, a good foundation. And he said to me, "I think that's what's kind of helped me along the way in my life, to try not to get caught in so many other things happening around." After he left the schools, Sam made his way back to his community, to his teachings, and to his language. He is an Anishinaabe language keeper. He is a spiritual guide. He takes care of his large extended family. You know that he's always holding sweats. I happen to know, I think he's got 3 this week. He works very much with the treatment center in Thunder Bay with our people. Sam has been happily married for decades to his wonderful, beautiful wife, Martha. He has children. He has grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You know, Sam has a knowledge that cannot be replaced. What he knows and what he passes on to so many of us is truly remarkable. And I take all of his teachings to heart, because Sam is an elder to all who need him, including to me. Because as I walk through this life, I know I have a lot to learn. I first met Sam in the courthouse in Thunder Bay during the inquest into the deaths of the 7 fallen feathers. 7 First Nations students from communities in the north, Treaty 9 and Treaty 5 area. And these students were all forced to move to Thunder Bay in order to gain a high school education, the fundamental right of every other child in Canada. As you know, the 7 students died between 2000 and 2011. And Sam was the elder at the inquest who was there to support the families of the 7. And I remember the first time that I met him, I arrived late at the courthouse. I was there covering the inquest. I was working for the Toronto Star at the time, and there were no seats available because, I arrived late, as I said, which is absolutely typical me. And there was basically one seat available, and that was right behind Sam. And Sam is a pretty tall, broad man. And I remember sitting in that courtroom and I couldn't see a thing because he was in front of me. I remember he had a long silver braid and I desperately wanted to pull it and ask him to move out of the way so I could see everything that was happening. But humor aside, though, it was not easy being in that courtroom. At the time, I was there as a journalist covering the inquest. As I said, it looked into the mysterious deaths of these 7 young people. Courtrooms are cold, clinical places with uncomfortable seating and stiff colonial rules. Yet, this was where 7 Anishinaabe families and their supporters sat grieving and listening to the lives and to the deaths of their loved ones. Their lives were being dissected by teams of lawyers, each with their own agendas. You should know that 5 of the students, 5 of the boys, were found floating in the waters surrounding the city, and the other 2 students died in their boarding homes. I always like to mention their names. I always like to remind people who they are, how important they are to their families, to all of us still. Jethro Anderson, he was in grade 9. He was 15 years old. He had just turned 15. Curran Strang. Curran was from Pikangikum. He was 18 years old. Paul Panichis. Paul was 21 years old, and he had lived in 10 different boarding homes in Thunder Bay, trying to get his high school education. Robin Harper, the only girl of the 7, she was 18, from Keewewin First Nation. She'd only been in Thunder Bay for a few days. Reggie Bushy, also in grade 9, also 15. Reggie was from Poplar Hill First Nation. Kyle Morrisseau. Kyle was 17, also from Keewewin. And Kyle, as you probably know, was the grandson of famed Ojibwe painter Norval Morrisseau. And Kyle was also a really talented artist. And then there's Jordan Wabas. Jordan was 15, from Webakwe First Nation, also a grade 9 student. At the inquest, Sam was there for the families of the students who died. He was their elder. I'd see him at the courthouse, talking, helping, comforting. And he was also there for me. We'd have coffee together, and I started to turn to him. I started to ask him questions. I started to look for answers from him, to get commentary on what we were hearing, seeing, and even feeling. I had a lot of questions sitting in that courtroom, both public ones about the proceedings and private ones about me, about how I felt like I inherently belonged with this story, with the words I heard in the courtroom, how I felt like I intimately knew these families, yet at the time many of them were strangers. I was questioning what was going on with the youth who were dying in the waters surrounding Thunder Bay. And I was questioning who I was as an Anishinaabe Kwe, a woman who comes from both worlds. My father was Polish Canadian, and my mother is from Fort William First Nation. What should my role be in all of this? How was I to be a journalist, an impartial journalist, who was supposed to maintain some sort of objective distance from the stories that I cover? These are questions I asked a lot back then, and sometimes it was overwhelming. My coffee dates with Sam were extremely supportive. It was hard to hear about the unexplained deaths of these young people, of how difficult their lives were in a city that did not welcome them. As you know, Thunder Bay has always been a divided city, a city of us and them. First Nations people in Thunder Bay, they live with everything, as you know, from your garden variety racism, the slurs, the sideways glances, being followed in malls by security guards, to something far, far worse. Unprovoked assaults, stabbings, beatings so severe, our people later die. And everyone has known for decades that it was, and still is, unsafe for our women to walk alone through the streets of Thunder Bay at night. After the inquest into the 7, recommendations came forward, 145 recommendations. We're still trying to work our way through those recommendations, trying to get Canada and Ontario and Thunder Bay to recognize what needs to be done. Once the inquest was finished, a probe started. A probe by the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, or the OIPRD, an offshoot of the Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General's Office. As soon as the inquest stopped, they stepped in, and they spent 2 years looking at the Thunder Bay Police Force, because what came up time and time again, in the courtroom, what came up time and time again in the media, was how our cases were not properly policed, how our people did not have their phone calls returned when they called to say someone was missing. There was no communication with officers. So the OIPRD came in and they did an investigation. That investigation was called Broken Trust, and it was led by Dr. Jerry McNeely. And the investigation said, out of the 44 recommendations that they had, they said that 9 deaths involving First Nations people must be reopened, reinvestigated, because they weren't done properly the first time around. And 4 of those investigations were of the 7 fallen feathers. Jethro's case was reopened. Curran's case was reopened. So was Kyle's and Jordan's. The report into that reinvestigation is just out now. And the report shows that nothing more can be done. Sadly, the families of Jethro, Curran, Kyle, and Jordan, and of the 9, are still seeking justice. And it's hard to reinvestigate cases. It's hard to go back and look for things, look back over old notes when they weren't properly done in the first place. While the OIPRD had a group of outside experts looking into those 9 cases, stunningly, they found another 15 cases of First Nations people, sudden deaths that weren't properly investigated, that needed to be reinvestigated. And on top of that, the report has said that another 25 cases of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls being looked at by the Thunder Bay Police need to be reopened and re-examined by a team of outside experts, and then figured out if those cases should be, again, reinvestigated from top to bottom. That initial broken trust report that came out in late 2018 that led to the 9, that led to the 15, and to the 25. That report said that the police were guilty of systemic racism, of not properly investigating Indigenous deaths. This is what Dr. Jerry McNeely said. He was head of the Broken Trust report. He said, "I found in my review of cases, Thunder Bay police investigators have failed on an unacceptably high number of occasions to treat or protect the deceased or his or her family equally or without discrimination because the deceased was Indigenous." Sam's 20-year-old grandson, Aaron Loon, is one of the 9 cases that was ordered reopened. Aaron died in March 2015. Sam said he was found by the Landmark Hotel, and that he was found in the morning, and that he was told by authorities that Aaron died of hypothermia. In Jerry McNeely's report, he wrote that Aaron's case is one of a number where an Indigenous person was presumed to have died because of hypothermia or drowning. The SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, is now looking at Aaron's case. McNeely pointed out that because of systemic racism, the police did not do their job. They did not try to figure out how this happened in the first place. And in several cases, they did not look to see whether foul play was involved. For the longest time, people in Thunder Bay, non-Indigenous people, have denied there is racism in this city, that it simply didn't exist, that the police weren't racist, the town council certainly wasn't racist, that Thunder Bay's racism problem was something made up by outsiders, by outside media, voices. And Sam said to me, "We see it everywhere, in the institutions, in the city, in those places like that. And it's kind of become something that you just live with every day." He said, "You never get used to it. And it's hard, because you know that this is just how it is." Sometimes, especially when you're living it, it is difficult to totally comprehend what is going on around you. Life seems to be going so fast, and so many things are swirling around us, and events in the news. Sam has said, it's like we are accelerating into a kind of chaos. And people are forgetting about all of the things around us. They're forgetting of our teachings. They're forgetting humility, love, respect for everything, for humanity, for the animals, for environment. He said, "I think this is a great reminder of what's going on right now. It's almost as if someone's saying, whoa, hang on a minute here. You have to look at where we're going. And we have to look back to our teachings to find a way forward. We have to understand that we are here for a purpose." Then he laughed and he said, "You know, the Creator knew that if he just wound us up and let us off on our own, we just run into walls." That's true. Acting from a place of love isn't always easy, especially if you are living in a country that has tried to erase you and your family, your community, and your way of life every single day. It's incredible to me of how much Sam gives of himself, how much love he has for all of those around him. Sam said, you know, history has a way of repeating itself. In our own time, we may have forgotten our teachings, but there is always something that comes back to remind us of them. He said you can't have one without the other. And that is something that our young people need to understand. It is not just the physical world that we are connected to. We are Anishinaabe. We are spiritual beings. It's important for our youth to understand that and to accept it and to follow the ways that we were taught so very long ago. Sam wants to see the day when his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, can live without racism, freedom from fear. And so do I. And that's why I'm so grateful that I've met Sam and that our paths crossed and that we're walking forward together. Because I find, as I said, myself turning to Sam time and time again as I write my books. I found myself turning to Sam as deep questions came up, questions of equality, of morality, of how a police force, a city, and an entire country seem to lack human decency when it comes to the lives of our children. Sam stood by me when I wrote both of my books, Seven Fallen Feathers and All Our Relations, and he stands by me now as I write my third book. And that third book is on residential schools and the recovery of our children. We started that book before I began researching. When I started thinking about this book, I was very grateful to be with Sam in ceremony, and we discussed what this was, what stories we were going to tell, how would we tell those stories, because these are sacred stories. This is sacred work. And I'm grateful to have him by my side. You know, it's hard for me. It's hard for all of us. How do you walk a day, every day, a day of understanding and love and peace, when so many of our kids are still dying, and when we're still finding we've just started to recover so many lost children? It's hard. It's hard when our women are still being targeted and going missing, when our people are incarcerated or shot and killed by police at high rates. It's hard to put anger aside at our society's failure to not judge a person by the color of our skin, but by the quality of their spirits. But it's Sam who shows me what it means to act from a place of love. How it does not mean ignoring your pain or your anger, of how love of self, of our communities, and of our places in it can help sustain us, even in the face of hate and indifference. Think of all of these things. I hope you think of these teachings. Think particularly of the teaching of love when you think of the work that the Anishinaabe Nation is doing now, we're all doing now, with the recovery of our children. It's almost been a year since I received a call from Te Kamloops te Shwepma asking me to come to Kamloops to listen to them and to document their story. They said, we heard, we've read what you've done, the books you've written. We'd like you to come here and witness and listen to our story. I've been to the community 3 times now. I have seen the work they are doing, and it is incredible, incredible work, sacred work. As you know, they publicly came out to say that they had found, they believed, the graves of 215 children in the apple orchards in front of the Indian residential school. They have been leading the way for many of us. Their public announcement of the findings of the children seems to have opened the door, seems to have opened a new chapter for all of us. Now, so many of our communities are looking at what happened. They're looking at what happened in their communities. They're looking to the schools. They are forming groups to come together and to figure out how we go forward. And it's not an easy task. I'm grateful for the lessons learned from Kamloops on how important it is to do this work in ceremony right from the start, to recognize that these are our children and they are looking for a way home. Their spirits want to know that they've been recognized. It's important we listen and involve everyone in community as we go forward in the recovery efforts. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's going to take time and it's going to take patience. But this is the one thing that our communities know. We have all the patience in the world. We're used to patience. And we are always thinking of the long game. We're always thinking of the 7 generations, of our children's children's children. And this is why we do the work. We do the work for the children lost generations ago, and we do them for the children that are to come. And I know that the only way of going forward with this work is if we work together, if we share our knowledge. And also that we never forget that this must be Indigenous led. We must make sure that everything done is from community first. Everyone else, other partners are second. It must come from the voices of the survivors, the elders. They must lead us in the directions we're going. And we can't give up, because we know it's going to be a long road. As I said, it's sacred work. But if you go forward with love, if you go forward thinking about those 7 teachings, I know that we are going to get there. We will bring our children home. And with that, I would like to say Chimigwich for listening to me. And I don't know if we have time for questions. Sometimes I talk a lot.
Thank you, Tanya, for sharing these stories with us and sharing with us the work that you've done over the years and over the course of your life, and reminding us of the power and importance that these 7 teachings do have in our day-to-day lives when we use them as a way to guide us and to help us with our healing journey. Chimigwech for that. I want to open the floor up for any questions that you may have for Tanya. You can comment in the chat system. I do see a few here. So yeah, the floor is open. So there's a question from Yvonne. My grandmother was Marie Louise Gauthier. I wonder if she was related to your mother.
Hello, Yvonne. Yes, she was. She is, so that our great grandmothers are sisters. Marie Louise was Elizabeth Gautier's sister. And I know, Yvonne, you have to send me your details afterwards. Yvonne, what's your last name? Sorry. And where are you from? Are you from Red Rock by any chance? This is such a niche moment that we're having right now.
Yvonne said,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yvonne says my Pretuluk was my maiden name.
Yeah. What nation are you from? I think you're Red Rock. Are you in Red Rock?
They said they don't know.
Okay. All right. This is a very long story that we'll have to take offline, but you are from Graham. And the interesting thing about Graham and Raith is, so my mother was raised in Raith, and your family, they were born in Kenora, raised in the Ignace Mission. Our family is right on the line of Treaty 3, Treaty 9, and Robinson Superior. Um, I find it interesting that that's where I do all my work too. But yes, I will email you. Sorry.
Amazing. Wow. Look at that.
There
Uh,
you go.
y- Yvonne, Kelsey will connect you to Tanya after so you can continue this conversation.
Great.
There was another question that we had from an anonymous person. What advice do you have for Indigenous people wanting to share and educate non-Indigenous people about our struggles, about the injustices in Thunder Bay?
Hmm. We keep talking, keep demanding change. Um, I actually just part of the reason why I just joined this call 5 minutes before it began was because I just got finished writing my next column for the Globe, and it is on what we still see in Thunder Bay. And sometimes, it's so hard because it's the same story over and over again. But this is the thing that our people are seeing over and over again. We're used to this, we know it. Um, but I think you just have to keep talking about it, telling people about it, and informing people that things must change now. We cannot rely on the old settler ways and systems of governance. We can't say, let's have another panel or let's have another report. Um, I can't tell you how many reports and panels have been written about the situation in Thunder Bay, not just from Broken Trust. We've had now two Broken Trust reports. Um, we also have had Murray Sinclair looking at the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. He released a report in 2018. I mean, how many more reports do we need? And then before that, we had the 7 Youth Inquest that had 145 recommendations. There does not need to be any more study. It's time to rebuild. And I would say that we should be pushing for Anishinaabe and Mushkegowuk people to be leading that change. And if we abolish the police and the police service, we get our people to decide and design what should be brought forward. I don't think there's any other possible way now. Um, we need to use Anishinaabe natural laws and ways forward because what has gone on has not worked for our people. As we've seen in these reports time and time again, our people are dying and nothing is being done.
I agree. Thank you, Tanya. I do have one more question before we close. These go hand in hand. Having done all the work you've done as a journalist and bringing these stories to light, how do you cope and work through your triggers? And how do you perform self-care after speaking with these families who have lost their children?
It's really hard, but part of the reason why I talk about Sam is because it's a reminder to me about love for our community. And I talk to Sam, as I said, I didn't talk to him yesterday, but I talk to Sam every day, other than that. Um, there's we keep in contact all the time. I keep in contact with so many um, the families. We all talk on Facebook Messenger. Um, I think that community and ceremony is the way forward. I go to sweat lodges all the time with Sam. Um, and I was really proud, and this is something we're going to be doing again in June. Hasn't been formally announced yet, but we held an Elders Summit in Thunder Bay at the Norwester Hotel, Anake Mikwewin. And that was put on by Sam because Sam decided that he wanted to hold a summit and he wanted it done within 4 weeks. And he wanted 100 people there. So we all moved mountains to do that. And then we even had we held a feast at Fort William at the end. and there was a sweat lodge every day. And that's how I stay connected and grounded. That's the only way to do it, I think, is to stay with community and to stay with in ceremony.
Beautiful. I really love that, how like it all comes down to community and ceremony and coming back to those foundations to move forward with our healing. And I completely agree, the power of like round dances, for example, like how much medicine that brings to community. And it's really important to remember this. And if there is anybody who does need additional support, remember the hotline is in the chat system. And we will be sending out a recording in a USB drive to everybody who has registered, so you can listen to the recording afterwards. And I just want to say thank you so much, Tanya, for sharing space with all of us today. And that concludes day 3 of the Resilient Speaker Series.
Sorry, Jocelyn. Virginia had her hand up. I just don't want to miss her comment there.
Oh, I
Sorry.
see. Oh, Virginia, yes, please do. I'm sorry. I this Zoom, it's like highlighted on my face, so I can't see everybody. But Virginia, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. It's hard to multitask when you're on Zoom. Tanya, thank you so much for your story, your beautiful voice. You took your time sharing. And I want to say that history is no longer hidden. Mainstream society has such a hard time to deal with the history that has been hidden from the rest of the country. And they are so uncomfortable having to deal with the many nations of our people that are on this continent, our beautiful home, Mother Earth. And for most of us that are in that good place, we are going to educate them with kindness. And that's a beautiful gift that we have, because I know some of our non-Indigenous people, they are carrying so much guilt of what their ancestors have done to our people. And we have to understand and let them know it is not our wish to put guilt on them, but for them to understand what our people have gone through, and that we can all move forward to live peaceful coexistence, because we all need each other to survive, because we all have our individual gifts to contribute to our nation. And I say Chimi Gwech for that. Thank you. Gazagan, lots of love to you.
Chimigwech.
Thank you for sharing, Kokomus, Virginia. That was really beautifully said. And I also want to thank Isidore for keeping the language alive through his translation support, to Melissa from Bib Baden Healing Lodge for providing wellness support, to Engaged Creative Productions for handling the technical side, to Regional Deputy Grand Chief Counsel Travis Bosenu, and Kelsey from Anishinaabe Nation for coordinating and bringing this resilience series to light. We will see you all at day 4 tomorrow of this series on Unreconciled Family, Truth, and Indigenous Resistance with Jessie White. Be well. We will see you tomorrow. Famapi, everybody.